Dark Souls 2 is an often overlooked entry in the Souls series, despite just how unique it was in experimenting with its mechanics and atmosphere back in 2014, in being sandwiched between the now iconic original Dark Souls and developer From Software's later efforts like Bloodborne. It's at times forgotten, thought of as an experiment, a tangent that wasn't followed up on. Even so, the modding community around Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, is blossoming on PC right now, and among the most remarkable mod offerings for the game is this, Dark Souls 2 Lighting Engine. Essentially, Lighting Engine is a replacement of the game's original engine that allows major changes to its visuals and offers a toolbox of sorts for others in the modding community to go much further. At its core, installing the Lighting Engine mod adds new anti-aliasing options like Nvidia's DLAA and AMD's FSR, replacing the FXAA post-processing of the official release. We get lighting upgrades, volumetric fog, vastly improved shadows, ground truth ambient occlusion, and it even rearranges foliage, trees, and terrain with new meshes. Really, this is just scratching the surface, with more work in progress features to come. Much of this begs the question, is this the Dark Souls 2 remaster that we've essentially needed all these years? Of course, Dark Souls 2 has technically already received a remaster of sorts with the Scholar of the First Sin update in 2015, a year after its initial release on PS3, Xbox 360 and PC. The idea back then was to upgrade Dark Souls 2 from DirectX 9 to DirectX 11 with improved lighting, textures, enemy placement, bug fixes, while also bundling the first 3 DLC expansions. However, despite this suite of upgrades, visually speaking, Scholar of the First Sin still falls short by modern standards. Certainly, it doesn't live up to the captivating early trailer of Dark Souls 2, the E3 2013 reveal where interplay between light and shadow was a major mechanic of play, where wind physics and volumetric effects played a bigger role. All of this was ultimately dialed back in the final release, and even failed to make the grade in Scholar of the First Sin as well. 10 years on then, it's impressive to see at least some of that early promise realised by an advanced mod like Lighting Engine, as devised by a fan of the game. So what does this mod do? Many of the upgrades, in talking with the Dark Souls 2 Lighting Engine creator directly, are achieved by reverse engineering the pipeline. He explains, in a similar way to RTX Remix, it's able to detect the G buffer when lights are rendered, and even Dark Souls 2's depth buffer is reverse engineered. Beyond that, other effects are achieved with hooks within the game code itself, meaning once a shader is loaded for the first time by the engine, that triggers an immediate response from the lighting engine to engage. With that in mind, let's start with a comparison of the newly added volumetric effects first. Volumetric fog is added into many areas now with the mod, layering on top of the simple, baked light shafts we already saw in the original Dark Souls 2. Here you get a proper volumetric fog effect filling the space, which in a pleasing way does bring it a step closer at least to that 2013 Dark Souls 2 reveal trailer. This is achieved through a huge folder of shader files, and by reverse engineering the game's depth buffer, a clean volumetric effect is created with no Z-fighting or artifacts across the distance. Most interior areas show off best, and it's notably running with adjusted color grading that adjusts by the map. Moving to exterior areas next, the shadow upgrades stand out most. These upgraded shadows take advantage of the almost fully deferred rendering approach in the Lighting Engine mod, which again interprets the base game's logic to implement higher quality soft shadows. Note how characters and objects in the environment, notably those overhanging trees, now cast shadows from most light points, and even the sun in a more realistic manner. Better still, this mod even offers multiple quality settings, ramping up to the PCSS option for Nvidia's contact hardening soft shadows, which allows for diffuse shading to appear the further an object is from the light source. Proximity between that light source, the ground, and occluding object is simulated in the end result, meaning player shadows will often logically look sharper nearer the ground. It's not using ray tracing, but the final effect of adding new shadows to the map, plus switching the game to PCSS, is an incredible feat of engineering. The environments are more richly shaded, and it makes it hard to go back to the original Dark Souls 2 areas, absent of shadows as they are. To explain how this is achieved in the mod creator's own words, once the G-buffer geometry draw is complete, the draw call data is cached for all players, enemies, and a few other important meshes within the scene. Using this cached data, the shadow map for all lights is rendered in what's described as a large texture atlas, just before the lighting engine begins to process the frame. From there, the clustered rendering compute shader will run through all local lights in a single dispatch for lighting and shadows across the scene. The result being accurately simulated shadows dynamically moving in response to every object within the environment, rather than only select objects. Sticking with the shadow upgrades, let's check out a few interior spots. Secondary lights, like torch lights in connecting dungeons, now of course cause the character to cast a proper shadow. In fairness, we already had shadows cast from bonfires and the sun in the original Dark Souls 2, but their application was limited elsewhere. Torches on dungeon walls simply cast no shade as you walk by, which is a limit that's even true of Elden Ring today. The Lighting Engine mod fixes that, and using PCSS, we get these sharp shadow outlines on nearby surfaces from torchlight. Additionally, as a bonus, the lighting engine allows specular highlights to bounce back from these torches, with a more detailed reaction across the nearby stone. Note how the torch on right creates more accurate, directional lighting around the archway. We also benefit from a much higher quality ambient occlusion, known as ground truth AO, which is also seen in engines like Unity. Fundamentally, this is a more accurate and less approximate variant of ambient occlusion that limits the so-called halo artifacts around a player as they pass, say, a shaded corner or grass, which remains a problem with the vanilla Dark Souls 2's built-in AO. As you'll no doubt see in the comparisons, GT-AO darkens the game's environments quite visibly, especially in No Man's Wharf. The need for a torch to light the route ahead is more crucial than ever before, which again is a point that plays a little closer to that original E3 concept trailer. All of this is presented at 4K resolution, and here I'm using the newly added Nvidia DLAA setting, which clearly tidies up rough geometric edges more effectively than the base game's FXAA. Beyond that, the engine adds many tweaks to the world's detail itself, many of which you'll likely have spotted already. Firstly, there's the new foliage and object placement, notably across the Forest of Fallen Giants. It's worth stressing that collision data is not changed with the Lighting Engine mod, served as is, so the boundaries of gameplay are intact from the base game. However, new elements like grass and also trees around inaccessible areas now embellish outdoor regions, and of course, these all now cast shadows. With a few exceptions like a new mountain asset, I'm told that these assets are sourced directly from the original game with no modifications. Changes to the code also make the game more performant. Grass, for example, is now batched and rendered in as a single draw call to reduce CPU load via the Lighting Engine mod. As for the hard geometry of Dark Souls 2, we now have adaptive tessellation in place. This increases and decreases polygon density based on distance, while in general, world LODs are pushed out, allowing us to see more distant terrain across the horizon. It's again very impressive stuff. The good news is, in terms of performance, the Lighting Engine mod runs with relative ease on modern systems. The RTX 4080 in my test PC, for example, took this on at 4K resolution with PCSS shadows enabled, and I was still hitting around 100 FPS in every area, using an FPS unlocker mod here. Oddly enough, I couldn't get the game to go higher than a 100 FPS cap, which appears to be an issue with the original game connected to some output devices. Still, putting that aside, this proves the point that these Lighting Engine changes are not so taxing that a locked 60 is impossible if that's the goal. On a more general level, Also impressive is the lighting engine's debugging features, which are accessible by pressing the F1 key. Once enabled, a window appears at the top right, letting you see all of the parameters for lighting, fog, GTAO, and the color grading. The debug viewing modes even let you see ambient occlusion and normals rendered in isolation in this handy split view. It truly raises the curtain on how each buffer combines to create the final frame we all recognize. Meanwhile, press the F3 key and even more options open up on left. The creative opportunities truly open up from here. Texture packs are easily installed by dropping them into the game's install folder, plus using the Lighting Engine Mod's Creator tool on F3, it's possible to paint new objects into Dark Souls 2's world, assuming you've the time to adjust the collision meshes that go with it. Indeed, some in the Dark Souls 2 modding scene, like Chris Leo and Rockdash, use this toolset to create some beautiful results, shown on their socials. Really, it underlines what a flexible tool it is, if you've the creative impulse, and also crucially the time to see an idea through. On its default setting though, the Lighting Engine mod makes adjustments with some faith to the original game layout, and I think there's some value in this. It does of course allow for an easy swapping in of new texture libraries from the Nexus mod vaults, but at its core, this mod does enough on its own to transform Dark Souls 2. It doesn't end here. Looking to the future, the creator of the Lighting Engine mod is also busy at work on a similar upgrade for Dark Souls 3, with GTAO, screen space reflections, volumetric fog, plus Nvidia's DLAA and AMD's FSR options planned for the third game. Still, what's in the Lighting Engine already deserves huge credit, and the manner in which it reverse engineers a 2015 PC release makes you wonder what more is possible. Thanks again to the author of the Lighting Engine mod for sparing some time explaining how it was put together. But that's all from me today. If you did find this video useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.